Hey, what is up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here, back with another Market Watch episode. So today we are taking a look at a few cards that are currently trending on the market. I don't really have a specific theme for the cards we're looking at today. These are just kind of cards from all of the market that people are paying attention to right now. Now we do have the 3v3 YCS in Las Vegas going on this weekend, and that's crazy because that's going to be the first big official tournament that we have after the latest ban list. So we should definitely expect a ton of things to get bought out unexpectedly as we move into next week. But for now, let's take a look at things that are currently trending, and we'll see if there's any connection to cards that we see later on. Let's get started. Alright, so the first card we're taking a look at here is Artifact Lancia, and here specifically we want to pay attention to the secret rare version. Artifact Lancia is a hand trap card where you can discard it during your opponent's turn to prevent all cards from being banished. This is naturally a really strong card against Kashtira, which are now unable to zone lock you or use the effect of something like a Rise Heart, or any of the other tons of things that Kashtira wants to do by banishing your cards. I know that some people aren't too big on Lancia as a hand trap against Kashtira. I think that Nibiru and Ash Blossom are starting to emerge and become popular once again, but there are people that actually think that Lancia is really just the way to go. I personally haven't tried it too much myself, but I really like Lancia as a card in general. I am a bit biased though. I loved using the card back in Necros format, but that doesn't mean anything now. Anyways, these secret rare versions have trended upwards over the last couple of months. These were down at around $5 to $7 for a little while, but they've steadily climbed and they're now sitting at $12 a piece each. The other versions are still fairly cheap. There's the gold rares and then ultras and then a bunch of different common versions that you should still be able to get for around $1 or so, but it's just these secret rares, which are the max rarity version, that are being eaten off of the market. As the card's highest rarity, I think I could actually see this card eventually maybe hitting like $15 to $20, assuming that the card sees competitive success and doesn't get any other high rarity printings. I don't want to buy these at 12 though, but if you can grab a set for maybe like 25 in cash or 30 trade, I think that that gives you a decent bit of room to potentially make a profit down the road. Next, let's take a look at Small World, and here I do have to take a second to blame Tombox. Small World is a really cool card that, in a way, lets you search for any monster in the game. Basically, you're banishing a monster from your hand and then one from your deck to search for another monster from your deck, but there's like a weird thing where exactly one component of the monster has to match between piece A and B and then B and C. This is theoretically a neg1, but the card you banish from your hand isn't a cost, right? So if you get ashed, the card just traded 1 for 1, and also it can get you any monster in the game. So if you really need a specific starter or a specific board breaker, then this might be the way to get it. But yeah, in a video that Tom posted on Thursday, he shows off using Small World as a tech in the Kashtira strategy and how it can be used to basically search for any of your monsters. It can turn your going first cards into going second cards and vice versa, or it can turn those techs into engine pieces, and that's a lot of really cool flexibility being added to the deck. I'll leave it to Tom's video if you guys want to hear more about it, but apparently that video caused a bunch of people to turn and pick up a ton of copies of Small World. This card was relatively cheap before, especially after the reprint. It was down at like $4 to $5. It had a weird wave of hype when this card first came out as people tried it in certain decks and saw a little bit of success with it, but the card really kind of fell off gradually, I guess, as people just found better options to use. Now, however, that it has finally found a potentially consistent home in Kashtira, we've seen a bit of a spike up with the Megatin copies at $8 each and the original Burst of Destiny secrets at 10 apiece. The card still seems relatively cheap, though it really will depend on this weekend and whether or not Small World Kashtira is able to do well, which will determine the price of this card moving forward. Keep an eye on this card throughout the weekend, and if you can still grab copies for like $5 or so at your locals, I think that's probably a pretty good gamble to take. Up next, this is kind of a terrifying looking card. It is Gimmick Puppet Nightmare. This is obviously a card that is intended for Gimmick Puppets. I've honestly never heard of it. I've never really been too interested in the strategy. I think that for the most part though, people have ignored this card because it's supposed to strictly be used in Gimmick Puppets. In fact, it has an effect that activates where, when it's summoned, the player that summoned it is locked into only Gimmick Puppets for the turn. Well, it just so happens that this is a card that players are trying to use with Branded Expulsion to special summon this card back to your opponent's side of the field during their turn, preventing them from summoning altogether. This is big because its effect lingers, right? So with something like Ido the Supreme Magical Force, if your opponent found a way to get it off the field, maybe with a Dark Hole or an enemy controller, they are now free. But since Gimmick Puppet Nightmare activates, if its effect manages to resolve, it doesn't matter what your opponent does with it. They're locked into Gimmick Puppets, which means that they're probably not summoning anything else that turn. Unless, of course, they actually are playing Gimmick Puppets, then good luck with that one. Anyways, this card only has one really odd super rare printing from back in Number Hunters, a really old set at this point, and because it has just the one printing and such limited availability, this card is now a solid $10 lowest on TCG Player, though I believe that like the most that the card is sold for is maybe $8. This is definitely something for you guys to go and dig up from your bulk bins and try to offload, since it just seems like a pretty gimmicky tech that I don't think is going to see too much success, so you guys will want to capitalize on the hype now and try to offload the card while you can. Okay, so this is one that I think is kind of troll, at least as far as I can tell. It is the Herald of Pure Light. Now this is a generic rank 2 Xyz monster that lets you detach a material from it to add a monster from your graveyard back to your hand, then shuffle one card from your hand back into the deck. Now at first, this card kind of seems whatever, right? It doesn't really generate you any card advantage, it's just a resource trade. So yeah, it's cool that it gets you something back, but that piece better be pretty good. I think we've actually talked about this card a couple of times before, and even though people do talk it up, it never actually ends up seeing very much competitive success. Well, over the last week, this card saw another buyout on TCG Player where it reached, I think, like $30 per copy at one point. Obviously an insane price for this super rare. However, I actually believe that the reason this card went up in price so much is because of Master Duel. Now on there, they just got the Sprite deck, and Max C is also legal, so you can actually take advantage of Pure Light to add Max C back to your hand, which is honestly pretty crazy. However, we don't have Max C here in the TCG, so it really is kind of a mystery as to why exactly this card would be such a high priority here. If it hasn't been used up until now, I don't think people would suddenly be clamoring to use it here now. Therefore, I have come to the conclusion that this card is spiking because Master Duel players played Sprite, considered picking up the deck in real life, and maybe just didn't realize that Max C is still banned, and that Pure Light just isn't as great in our format. This card only has one printing, since it wasn't even reprinted in the tins, and that is why the card got so high. The card is still now sitting at around $20 per copy. If you guys happen to still have a copy or two of this card, I would definitely recommend offloading this while there's still some of this initial hype, especially since the deck is still suffering from the banning of Sprite Elf. The next one is another Herald card. This time it is the Herald of the ArcLight. This is a pretty cool generic level 4 synchro monster. Now on the field it has like a Macrocosmos and a Solemn Judgment like effect, but it's a bit of a weaker monster to bring out. I did used to love making this card when I was trying to play Pure Yang Zing though. However, its other key effect is that if it is sent to the graveyard from anywhere, you can search for a ritual monster or a ritual spell card. Now it just so happens to be a fairy monster as well, which means that it can be sent to the graveyard with Diviner of the Herald, which effectively turns Diviner into a searcher. Now in the game right now, there aren't a ton of great ritual decks. Drytron, I guess, gets better with the limiting of the Ishizu cards, but I don't think they're anything too wild. However, the brand new Nouvelle archetype coming in Wild Survivors wants to use Diviner and ArcLight, and because of this, all of the different versions of Herald of the ArcLight are trending up across the board. This card was expensive for a while, but then we got a maximum gold rare reprint and an ultra rare printing from a Battles of Legends set, and it looked like we were good with this card finally, being only like $1 or so. However, it seems like a lot of players are gradually wanting to pick up sets of this card, and you're now looking at an average of $5 per copy, maybe $3 for the ugly gold rare, and then like $6 or $7 for the original print super rare. If you can still grab these cards for only $1 or $2 somewhere, I think that this is a card that's really low key right now that not a lot of people are aware of, so you should try to pick it up wherever possible if it's at the right price. Alright, so this is a card that we haven't talked about on Market Watch for a while, but I guess it was only a matter of time. Baby Cerasaurus is a card that a lot of people are looking at right now, and it shouldn't come as a surprise to you guys that this is because of the Transcendrake archetype. Transcendrakes have a Searcher spell that lets you also pop a card from your hand, allowing you another way to proc Baby's effect and summon a dinosaur out of the deck. Of course, this just leads you to another way that you can abuse the fact that Baby Cerasaurus isn't a once per turn effect. On top of that, we have True King Lithosagem at 3, and baby Cerasaurus just happens to be an earth monster, so there's potentially going to be a lot of people playing around with dinosaurs in just a few months. Now, when we looked at this card before, the only nice version of the card was the Duelist League colored rare, which was crazy expensive. The card didn't even have a holo printing yet, right? And for those Duelist League cards, they're still expensive. They're up at like $20 to $25 a piece, depending on the color you're looking at. But in my opinion, they're always really overpriced just because of how difficult they are to find. I personally would be very rarely willing to pay up for a Duelist League copy of a card when other holo versions are available. What I think is more worth buying right now, or at least paying attention to, is the super rare copies from OTS Tournament Pack 18, which was only $1 before but is now up to $3 to $4 each. Not a crazy amount, but it's a card that is still now worth a few dollars, and in my opinion, looks much nicer than the non-holo colored rares. And finally guys, there is one last card we're going to take a look at for today, and that is Steel Swarm Roach. Now this card is a really simple generic rank 4 monster. When a level 5 or higher monster would be special summoned, you can detach a material from this card to negate the summon and destroy the monster. This card was really cool early on as a generic rank 4 monster that felt just like a floodgate, and its effect isn't once per turn, so you do get 2 negates on that first turn. Now, however, this card could actually be really useful as an extra deck option against Kashtira, negating the special summon of cards like Fenrir and Unicorn and destroying them. The problem is, I'm not 100% sure exactly what decks are even going to be able to make this. I guess there is Tearlament. We're still not sure yet if Tearlaments will be able to play in this upcoming format for sure. And I guess we could see it in something like Labyrinth, since this is also a fiend as well. But it does seem a bit situational because you don't really go into rank 4s in that deck either. I'm not too sure exactly where this card will be used, but it certainly seems like if a deck can make this, this card would be a very effective way to play against Kashtira. Now, because of this application, however, Steel Swarm Roach's 2 printings have gone way up in price. The original printing of Secret Rares are way up there as expected at around $30 each. I think that they're like $40 or so for the first editions. And then the scary thing is that the Super Rares are the card's only other printing, and those are $12 each right now. That's really crazy to me because I remember selling a couple of these for $1 each a few years ago and thinking I got crazy value because these were such bulk cards back then. Anyways, if you guys do happen to have some copies of Steel Swarm Roach in your bulk, now is definitely the time to dig them out and see how the market reacts moving forward. Keep your eyes on the YCS this weekend to see what decks are being played that are able to actually make this card consistently. Alright guys, that is all we have for today. Hopefully we'll see some really crazy things from the YCS this weekend in Vegas. I know it's a new format and anything can happen, so I'm really hoping that we see some spicy techs and deck lists that are just going to feel completely out of left field. Those are always really fun to see, and it's always interesting to see how the market reacts as a result. Anyways guys, if you did enjoy today's Market Watch episode, please make sure that you let me know by hitting that thumbs up button for me. Also make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below. Let me know what you guys think about the cards we talked about today, and let me know what other cards are trending on the market as well. Also, if you haven't already, do make sure that you guys hit that subscribe button to get all of the latest and greatest content from both Tombox and myself. And until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.